Standard Clone Trooper. Standard Clone Troopers are the main fighting force of the Grand Army of the Republic. They were grown on the planet Kamino, an order secretly placed by Jedi Master Sifo Dyas. He had foreseen a major galactic war and wanted the Republic to be prepared. After Sifo Dyas died, the Sith Lord Darth Sidious and his apprentice, Count Dooku, secretly took control of the project. The clones were created using the genetic template of a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Jango Fett. Their genes were altered to make them more obedient and less independent than Fett. They were also engineered to age twice as fast as a normal human. This meant a clone was ready for combat in only 10 years. On Kamino, they were trained as cadets from a young age. When the war with the Separatists began, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine was given emergency powers to activate this army. The clones first saw battle on the planet Geonosis, which started the Clone Wars. For 3 years, they fought bravely beside their Jedi generals. While most were loyal, a few clones started to question their purpose, and some even deserted the army. Their destiny was sealed by a secret biochip implanted in their brains. This chip contained behavioral modifications, including a command known as Order 66, which was the final step in the Sith plan to destroy the Jedi Order. ARF Troopers. ARF Troopers, which stands for Advanced Recon Force Troopers, were specialists in scouting. They wore lighter armor than standard clones, which allowed them to move faster and with more stealth. They were often seen riding all-terrain recon transports, or ATRT walkers, into battle. ARF troopers were considered more intelligent than the average clone and had better survival training. Their primary job was to perform short-range reconnaissance missions for Jedi generals and clone commanders, gathering information on enemy positions before the main army arrived. They wore a unique style of Phase 1 armor that was later updated as the war progressed. RC Troopers. ARC Troopers, or Advanced Recon Commandos, were some of the most elite soldiers in the entire Grand Army. They were widely seen as the best of the best. In the current story, the rank of RC Trooper was a title awarded to standard clones who demonstrated incredible skill, bravery, and independent thinking on the battlefield. The troopers Fives, Echo, and Jesse from the 501st Legion all earned this rank. In older stories, known as legends, RC Troopers were designed to be superior from their creation. Jango Fett insisted that some clones should be made without most of the behavioral modifications, allowing them to be more creative and independent for covert missions. This resulted in the Alpha-class ARC Troopers. These RCs, like the famous Captain Fordo, were so skilled that they were used to train many of the clone commanders, including Captain Rex and Commander Cody. Clone Commandos. Clone Commandos were another of the Republic's elite special forces units. They operated in 4-man squads, working together with perfect synergy. The most famous of these units were Delta Squad and Omega Squad. Each member of a commando squad was a specialist in a specific area. For example, Scorch of Delta Squad was an expert with explosives and demolitions, while his squad mate Sev was a master sniper. Clone Commandos were given the missions that standard troopers could not handle. These missions often involved deep infiltration behind enemy lines, sabotage, demolition, and even assassination. Their skills made them ideal for operations, where a small, highly effective team was needed. Clone Advisors. Clone Advisors worked in a support role, often with Clone Commandos. Their job was to stay back at a command center and provide the squad in the field with real-time updates on the mission. They would feed the commandos intelligence and updated objectives as the situation changed. So little is known about this role that it may not have been a permanent position. It could have been a temporary duty assigned to any trooper who had the necessary skills for a particular mission. Cold Assault Troopers. Cold Assault Troopers were trained to fight and survive in Arctic environments. They wore specialized armor that protected them from freezing temperatures. This armor was equipped with heating systems to keep them warm and polarized visors on their helmets to protect their eyes from snow blindness. This special gear allowed them to operate effectively on ice planets like Ordo Plutonia and Ren Var. BRK Troopers. BRK Troopers, short for Biker Advanced Recon Commandos, were experts at piloting BARC speeders. These speeders were incredibly fast and were used to cross difficult terrain and battlefields at high velocity. Troopers like Commander Neo were well-known BRC specialists. They wore a modified version of clone armor, including a unique helmet that was designed to block their peripheral vision. This helped them focus on what was directly in front of them, preventing distractions that could be fatal when traveling at such high speeds. Clone Paratroopers. Clone Paratroopers were also called Airborne Troopers. These soldiers were trained for high-altitude combat drops. They would be deployed from gunships, dropping directly into the middle of a battle from the sky. They wore a modified type of Phase 2 armor that included a cloth comma around their waist and a distinct beehive-shaped helmet. This helmet had extra breathing equipment for high-altitude jumps. Some paratroopers also served as snipers, using the high ground they started on to their advantage. Clone Galactic Marines. The Clone Galactic Marines were among the most hardened and resilient soldiers in the Republic Army. This unit, originally called the 21st Nova Corps, was led by Jedi General Ki-Adi-Mundi and Clone Commander Bacara. They fought in some of the most brutal battles of the war. Their armor was colored maroon and was specially designed to protect them from many different environmental hazards, including snow, sand, airborne fungus, and volcanic ash. The Galactic Marines were trained to be versatile, able to fight in any environment, whether it was on land, in the vacuum of space, or while boarding an enemy ship. Commander Bacara held his men to extremely high standards and would transfer any Marine who could not meet his demands for perfection. Clone Medics. Clone Medics were soldiers trained to provide medical aid to wounded troopers on the battlefield. On Kamino, they received special training that focused on clone anatomy. The Medic Kicks, from the 501st Legion, is a famous example. Their armor featured red markings to identify them as medical personnel. They also carried backpacks filled with medical supplies like Bacta-spray, syringes, and other tools needed to save lives in the middle of a fight. Clone Artillery Troopers. Clone Artillery Troopers were specialists who operated heavy artillery weapons. These included mortars and large cannons. Their role was to provide indirect fire support from a safe distance, bombarding enemy positions to weaken them before the infantry troopers launched their main assault. Not much else is known about this specific class of clone trooper. Clone Ordnance Specialists. Clone Ordnance Specialists were the bomb squad of the Grand Army. They were tasked with the incredibly dangerous job of finding and disarming explosive devices planted by the enemy. Their armor was the standard Phase 1 type but had unique orange markings to identify their specialization. Unfortunately for them, their armor offered no extra protection against explosions. This made their job one of the deadliest in the entire army, with a very high casualty rate. Clone Shock Troopers. Clone Shock Troopers served as a military police force on the Republic's capital world, Coruscant. They were part of a larger unit called the Coruscant Guard. Their duties included providing security for important government buildings and prisons. They also served as bodyguards for senators and other officials and acted as peacekeepers in the city. Shock Troopers were easily identified by the bright red markings on their white armor. Clone Riot Troopers. Clone Riot Troopers were a special division within the Coruscant Guard. They were deployed to handle situations of civil unrest, like protests or riots. Instead of using deadly blasters, they were equipped with non-lethal weapons. These included shock batons and large riot shields, which they used to control and disperse crowds without causing fatalities. Kamino Security Clones. Kamino Security Clones had a job similar to that of shock troopers, but they were stationed only on the planet Kamino. Their sole purpose was to act as the security force for the cloning facilities in Tipoca City. They protected the Republic's most important military asset, the ability to create more clones. Their armor looked similar to the Coruscant Guards, but their markings were gray instead of red. Clone Pilots. Clone pilots were chosen for their role early in their training because they showed superior reflexes and spatial awareness. They were trained to fly the Republic's various starships, such as LAAT gunships, Y-wing bombers, ARC-170 fighters, and V-19 Torrents. They wore specialized flight suits and helmets that were equipped with life support systems for combat in space. Special Ops Clone Troopers. Special Ops Clone Troopers were trained for missions that required stealth. They learned how to move quickly and quietly, and were trained to detect hidden enemies from a greater distance than a standard trooper. They used advanced gear that enhanced their senses. They were also known to fly an experimental stealth ship that was equipped with a cloaking device. Clone Gunners. Clone Gunners operated the powerful weapon systems on Republic vehicles, artillery pieces, and starships. They wore specialized armor that had reinforced plating for extra protection. Their helmets were designed with noise-insulating parts to protect their hearing from the deafening sound and intense recoil of the weapons they fired. Clone Comms Technicians. Clone Comms Technicians had the vital job of maintaining communications on the battlefield. This was an essential role for any large military operation. They made sure that commanders could give orders and that squads could coordinate with each other over long distances, ensuring the army could function as a cohesive unit. Clone Engineers. Clone Engineers were troopers with a wide range of technical skills. They were able to repair damaged vehicles, use explosives for demolition, and were also responsible for building Republic outposts and bases on planets that had just been captured from the Separatists. Clone Shadow Troopers. Clone Shadow Troopers were a special unit focused on deep cover reconnaissance. They wore modified black armor that had magnetic seals. These seals allowed them to attach different armor plates to disguise themselves as mercenaries or soldiers from other groups. This allowed them to infiltrate enemy bases to gather secret intelligence without being detected. Covert Ops Clone Troopers. Covert Ops Clone Troopers were assigned to do the jobs that most other clones would consider wrong. Their main job was to hunt down clone troopers who had deserted the army and eliminate them. This was one of the most secret units in the Republic military. All of their missions and activities were kept out of public and military records. Clone Assassins. Clone Assassins were created by a special order from Chancellor Palpatine himself. These clones were trained for one purpose: to kill Jedi. They were masters of an unarmed combat style called Teräs Käsi. which they learned by sparring with captured Jedi Padawans. This training made them incredibly fast and gave them the ability to predict an opponent's moves and resist Jedi mind tricks. Clone Jet Troopers. Clone Jet Troopers used jetpacks to gain an advantage in battle. The jetpacks allowed them to move quickly around the battlefield and attack from the air. Their high mobility made them difficult for enemies to hit and allowed them to set up ambushes from above or get behind enemy lines. Clone Sharpshooters. Clone Sharpshooters, also known as Clone Specialists, were given extra training in long-range marksmanship. Their ability to hit targets from very far away with a sniper rifle was much better than that of a regular trooper. However, their focus on long-range fighting made them less effective in close-quarters combat. Heavy Weapons Clone Troopers. Heavy Weapons Clone Troopers carried the biggest guns to provide anti-vehicle support for the infantry. They used massive weapons like Z6 rotary blaster cannons, rocket launchers, and thermal detonators to destroy enemy tanks, heavy droids, and fortified enemy positions. Clone Scuba Troopers. Clone Scuba Troopers were given special equipment for fighting in underwater environments. They wore a scuba backpack with breathing tubes connected to their helmets and had fins that attached to their boots. This gear let them operate underwater for long periods during battles on ocean planets like Mon Cala. Clone Flame Troopers. Clone Flame Troopers used flamethrowers to force enemies out of fortified positions and trenches. They wore special armor that was designed to resist extreme heat. The first version of their armor had a flaw in its smoke filtration system, but this was fixed in later models. Blaze Troopers. Blaze Troopers were an even heavier and more powerful version of Flame Troopers. Their job was to clear paths through enemy defenses and battlefield rubble. They were equipped with heavy jetpacks and had flamethrowers mounted on both of their wrists. Their armor was extremely thick and durable to protect them from the intense heat of their own weapons. Defective Clones. Defective clones were clones that had genetic mutations or physical defects from the cloning process. Most of these clones were decommissioned, but some had what were considered desirable mutations. The best example is Clone Force 99, also known as the Bad Batch. Their mutations made them elite specialists, and they operated as a unique commando squad during the war. We also have to give honorable mentions to the many clones who served the Republic in other important roles away from the fighting. This includes the Clone Flight Crew, who repaired starships, medical officers who worked in hospitals, various naval officers who commanded the Republic fleet, and maintenance clones like 99, who supported the Army with incredible loyalty and dedication. But which clone trooper variant is your favorite? Which individual clone do you love the most? Let us know down in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe to join our squadron. Until next time, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.